My dad, born 1928, who worked in a tool and die shop, was able to buy a house, acquire a new car every 2 years, and take a 2-week vacation every year, because the middle class in America, before Ronald Reagan, had a pretty damn good life. He retired in the 1990s with a full pension that let him and my mom travel the world. He was living the American dream. Millennials today, by contrast, include roughly the same number of people as boomers did in 1990, but hold only 4.6% of the nation's wealth. And if they're the same age as I was in 1990, they are most likely struggling to own a home, are deeply in debt, and find it nearly impossible to start a small business. Yes, you heard that right. Boomers in their 30s owned 21.3% of the nation's wealth. Millennials in their 30s today own 4.6% of the nation's wealth. And the story for Zoomers, those born in the late 90s and early aughts, is pretty much the same. As a Bank of America research report noted, like the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009 for millennials, COVID will challenge and impede Gen Z's career and earning potential. Similarly, a Stanford University study that looked at Zoomers shows the consequence of Trump's disastrous handling of the pandemic. College graduates who start their working lives during a recession earn less for at least 10 to 15 years than those who graduate during periods of prosperity. What happened? In a word, Republicans. We boomers remember well the Reagan Revolution of 1981, which laid the foundation for billionaires and giant corporations to impoverish generations X, Y, and Z. First, GOP fat cats came for our wages. Those first 2 decades of the Reagan Revolution saw the initial major attack on workers' wages since Democratic President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed the National Labor Relations Act, which gave union members legal protection from physical and economic violence way back in 1935. In 1990, the end of the first decade when millennials were coming into the world, Republicans were still just getting started. 56% of workers who applied for union representation got their union. That wasn't as good as during my dad's generation. 80% of workers got a union when they petitioned for one in the 1940s. But it was still a far cry from what millennials and Zoomers are facing today. Giant, trillion-dollar corporations employ the billion-dollar union-busting industry, which didn't exist in 1980, to keep them from having democracy in the workplace. In large part, this is because right-to-work-for-less laws that allow employers to gut their unions began spreading in a big way in the 1980s and 1990s after several employer-friendly 5-4 decisions by Republicans on the Supreme Court.